The fence on the north side had been leaning wrong for 3 days. Ward Callum noticed it the way he noticed most things, without alarm, without rush, just a quiet knotting in the back of his mind that a thing needed doing and would get done. He pulled on his work coat, picked up the post driver, and walked out into the amber morning of Jura 9 with the kind of peace that only comes from having nothing left to prove. He was 67 years old. His hands were thick and scarred and entirely comfortable holding tools. The moon around him was flat and rust-colored and almost completely silent. No neighbors, no traffic, no one who knew his name or cared to. That was the point. He had fixed 2 posts and was starting on the 3rd when the sky cracked open. Not lightning, not weather, something coming through the atmosphere too fast, trailing fire in a long white scar across the amber clouds. Ward watched it without moving. He tracked its angle, its speed, its likely landing point. Old habits. The calculation was done before he had finished the thought. It was going to hit his north field. He set down the post driver. The impact was less than a kilometer out, a hard thud that shook the ground under his boots and sent a column of black smoke into the sky. Ward walked toward it, not running, walking. He had learned a long time ago that running toward wreckage rarely helped anything and usually cost you the breath you needed once you got there. It was a Draken escape pod, small, civilian-grade. One side had been torn open on impact and the landing struts had collapsed, leaving it tilted hard to the right. The outer hull was scorched in a pattern Ward recognized. It had been hit before it launched. Something had shot at it. He stood at the edge of the wreckage and waited. A sound came from inside, then another, then a small clawed hand appeared at the torn edge of the hull, gripped the metal, and a Draken hatchling pulled itself out. Its iridescent blue scales were dusty and scratched. Its eyes, large and gold, blinked in the amber light. It looked at Ward. Then another hatchling came out, then another, then 4 more, in various states of dishevelment, the last one so small it had to be helped out by the one before it. 7 of them, standing in a rough cluster in Ward's north field, staring at him. The tallest one, blue-scaled and straight-backed despite a bleeding scrape on her arm, squared her shoulders and looked at him directly. She said, in rough but clear galactic standard, "Can we stay with you?" Ward looked at them. He looked at the pod. He looked at the smoke still rising from the hull, at the blast marks on the outer panel, at the way every single one of the smaller hatchlings was standing just slightly behind the tall one. He looked at the smallest, a pale green creature barely reaching his knee, who was clutching the back of the tall one's wing with both hands and watching him with enormous, unblinking eyes. He did the same calculation he always did when something unexpected landed in front of him. He ran through it fast and quiet. Then he turned around. "Wipe your feet," he said, and walked back toward the farmhouse. There was a pause behind him. Then, the sound of 7 sets of clawed feet following. He fed them first. He always dealt with wounded things by feeding them, people, animals, it did not matter. Hunger made everything worse. He put together what he had, cold grain cakes, dried protein strips, 2 kinds of fruit that Draken biology could handle. He set it on the big table, and they ate like they had not eaten in a very long time, which they probably had not. He watched them while he made himself coffee. He counted the injuries, minor, all of them, nothing that needed more than cleaning and time. He counted the ages, hatchlings, all of them, no adults, no clan mark insignia on the pod exterior. Whatever had happened out there, they were alone. When they were done eating, the tall one looked at him again. "I am Sora," she said. "These are my group." "Ward," he said. He went to the wall console and sent a shortwave ping to the nearest relay station, 6 words. 7 Draken hatchlings, need supplies. No name, no location code, just the request. The reply came back in 4 minutes. It was marked priority. It was signed by someone 3 levels above what a farming moon should ever hear from. Ward read it again, then deleted it and went to bed. Behind him, in the main room, 7 hatchlings arranged themselves on his floor. The smallest one found his work boots by the door and curled up against them. She was asleep in under a minute. Ward lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about the blast marks on the pod, and who had made them and why. He did not sleep for a long time. On the third morning, Tuck ate a boot. Not the whole boot, just the left heel of Ward's indoor pair, which he had foolishly left within reach of the table. Ward discovered this when he sat down to breakfast and found the heel on the floor with tooth marks in it, and Tuck sitting 2 seats away, trying very hard to look like a different hatchling entirely. Ward looked at the boot, he looked at Tuck, he said, "That comes out of your work hours." Tuck did not fully understand what that meant, but he understood the tone, and spent the morning helping Ward carry water from the storage tank to the livestock pen without complaining. That was how Ward ran things. Clear rules, clear consequences, no shouting. The hatchlings figured out very quickly that he meant exactly what he said, and said only what he meant. That was more than most adults gave them, and they responded to it the way young things respond to any honest, solid structure, with something close to relief. He gave them all chores. Sora managed inventory because she was organized and liked knowing where things stood. Bryn went with him on morning rounds, asking approximately 40 questions per hour. Dos handled the livestock pen because he was quiet and the animals did not startle around him. Rael was assigned to nothing specific because no assignment could reliably contain her, so Ward pointed her at whatever needed doing and let her run. The twins, Tuck and Nera, worked in pairs on anything that needed 2 sets of hands. Gwyn, the smallest, stayed close to Ward and was given very small, very important jobs that kept her near him without making her feel watched. It worked because Ward had run larger operations with less. He did not think about that, he just did the work. Bryn was the one who noticed the books first. They were on a shelf in the back room, old physical volumes in at least 4 different scripts. She could not read any of them. She brought one to Ward and asked what language it was. He said it was Narthai. She asked if he spoke Narthai. He said a little. She asked him to say something. He said something in Narthai without hesitating, fluid and low, and then went back to fixing the water filter like nothing had happened. Bryn brought the book back to Sora, who added it to her mental file without comment. Nera found the box the following week. It was under the loose board near the western wall, which she had found because she noticed the board sounded different when she walked on it. She pried it up without guilt. She was curious the way some creatures are hungry, constantly and without apology, and there it was. Metal, old, locked with a mechanism she did not recognize, heavy for its size. She shook it, something shifted inside. She shook it again. Ward appeared in the doorway. He did not raise his voice. He said, "That is not for you," and the words were quiet and even, but every hatchling in the house went still. Nera put the box down. Ward picked it up, put it back, put the board back, and returned to what he had been doing. Nera sat where she was for a moment, then went outside to help Dos with the pen. She did not go near the board again. It was Dos who noticed the wall first. There was a long, thin scar in the main beam of the living room, not a scratch, not wear, a blade mark, deliberate, old, the kind left by something very sharp moving very fast. He studied it quietly one afternoon while everyone else was at dinner. He did not say anything about it. But later he looked at Ward's hands, really looked at them, the knuckle structure, the old calluses on the wrong places for a farmer, the way his right thumb sat slightly different than it should. Dos went back to his food and said nothing. That same week, a supply merchant landed on the edge of the property, a regular circuit trader, round and tired-looking, who pulled up his manifest and started calling prices out before he had fully climbed down from the dock ramp. Then he looked at Ward's face. He stopped mid-sentence. Something behind his eyes shifted. He dropped every price. He gave Ward 3 items that were not on the order. He left faster than he arrived. He did not look back. Rael asked Ward why the merchant had looked scared. Ward said the merchant was a very nervous person. Rael said he had not looked nervous before he looked at Ward. Ward said he had not been looking closely enough. Rael filed this away in the same place. She filed everything interesting. That night Sora climbed to the roof. She lay on her back and looked at the stars the way Draken do when they are thinking about something too large for words. She had been raised on the stories every Draken hatchling knew. the war, the line of Merin, the 11 days, the human commander who held a pass alone until the evacuation was complete, and then, when it was over, simply walked away. She thought about the books in 4 languages, the blade mark on the beam, the merchant's face, the way Ward had said, "That is not for you," and the whole house had gone quiet. She did not go to sleep for a long time. Below her, through the roof, she could hear him moving in the kitchen, making coffee he would not finish, same as every night. She looked at the stars and said nothing to anyone. The relay broadcast came in on a dry Tuesday with nothing else going on. Ward had the console on low while he worked on the engine block of the field hauler, and the hatchlings were scattered around the yard doing their various things. The signal was scratchy but clear enough, a galactic news relay, the kind that bounced across the outer moons every few days. Usually it was cargo prices and shipping lane updates and things that had nothing to do with Jura 9. This one was different. The broadcaster was talking about the growing tension between 2 major powers in the inner ring and what it might become if no one stepped in. Then she said, "Political analysts are calling for cooler heads, some going as far as to say the situation requires the kind of strategic thinking last seen in figures like Callum, whose handling of the fracture wars remains the benchmark for large-scale conflict resolution." Bryn looked up from the fence she was repainting. She walked into the garage and looked at Ward. "Who is Callum?" she asked. Ward did not look up from the engine. "No idea," he said. Bryn looked at the console, then at Ward, then she went back to the fence. Nira heard it too. She spent the rest of that day quieter than usual, which was not typical of Nira. She went back into the house and did something she had been planning for a while, something she had been working up to slowly, the way she did things that mattered. She went to the back room. She took out every book from the shelf, one by one, and looked through each one carefully. In the 3rd book, between 2 pages near the back, she found a photograph. It was old, printed on actual paper, which nobody used anymore. It showed a man in a military dress uniform so covered in decorations it was almost absurd, ribbons and bars and medallions arranged in precise rows across the chest. The man was younger, but the jaw was the same. The eyes were the same. Behind him hung a formal banner, Supreme Commander WCALLUM, Line of MERIN Commendation Ceremony. Nira looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she went to find Sora. They came to Ward together. He was still in the garage, had moved from the engine block to recalibrating one of the field sensors. Sora set the photograph on the workbench beside him and said nothing. Ward looked at it. He put down the sensor tool. He picked up the photograph and turned it over. On the back, in faded handwriting, "Day 11, we made it." He set it back on the bench. He said, "Where did you find that?" Nira told him. He nodded once, the way he nodded when he was not surprised. Then he went and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, and all 7 hatchlings arranged themselves around him without being asked, because somehow they all knew this was the kind of moment you showed up for. He told them about the war. He did not tell it the way the broadcasters told it. There were no great charges or glorious last stands. He talked about mud and cold and the particular weight of making decisions when there was no good option, only a less bad one. He talked about soldiers who were terrified and did their jobs anyway. He talked about the 11 days in Merin Pass, the way a man talks about something that happened to a body he used to live in, factual, distant, careful. When he stopped, Bryn asked, "Are you the reason the Draken still exist?" Ward drank his coffee. "The Draken held the Eastern Corridor themselves for 9 days, he said. "Your people are not the kind that need saving. I just made sure the exit was clear." Sora said, "That is not a small thing." "No," Ward said, "it was not small. None of it was small. That is why I left." The hatchlings were quiet, not the restless quiet of boredom, the real kind, when something has been set down in the room that everyone can feel. Dos spoke. It was the longest sentence any of them had heard from him since the crash. He said, without looking up from the table, "I knew you were not a farmer." Then he picked up his plate and carried it to the sink. Ward watched him go. Something moved briefly across his face that was not quite a smile and not quite sadness. Then he looked at the rest of them. Rail immediately asked if he had ever punched anyone. Ward said yes. Rail looked like she had won something. That night before bed, Ward let Gwyn sit in his lap while he read. He never offered, she simply climbed up, turned in a small circle and settled, and he moved the book to make room without comment. She put one tiny hand on his arm. He had not let anyone sit that close in longer than he could clearly remember. The locked box stayed under the board. Some nights he could hear Neera lying awake near it, just thinking, not touching, but thinking. He understood. She was the kind of creature who needed to know the shape of things, even the things she could not open. He understood that too. He had been like that once. Before he learned what was inside some boxes. The first ship came down hard and official, with Galactic Authority markings on both wings and a landing that announced itself like it expected applause. Commander Velsorin of the Authority Investigation Division was a Nathai, tall, feathered, precise, in the way of someone who had never once been uncertain about his own importance. He came down the ramp with a data pad and two officers flanking him, and he looked at Ward's farmhouse the way people look at things they have already decided do not matter. "I am here regarding 7 Draken miners registered to this location," he said. His galactic standard was perfect. His tone was the tone of someone reading from a script he wrote himself. Ward said, "You want coffee?" Soren said he did not want coffee. He said the hatchlings needed to be transferred to official protective custody pending investigation of the transport attack. He said it was standard procedure. He said this in a way that made it clear he was not interested in any other way. The hatchlings appeared from around the side of the house. Not threateningly, they simply came and stood together near Ward, all 7 of them, shoulder to shoulder in a rough line. Sora stood at the front. She looked at Commander Soren with the particular gold-eyed stillness that Draken use when they are deciding how seriously to take something. Tuck bit Soren's boot. Not hard, not even breaking the material, just a short, sharp bite like a punctuation mark. Then he sat back and looked completely innocent. Ward did not apologize. Soren looked at the hatchlings. He looked at Ward. He pulled out his data pad and ran a background check on W. Callum, Jura 9, the way he did with everyone, a formality usually finished in seconds. The data pad thought about it for a while, then it returned, classified level 9, access DNID. Soren looked at the screen. He had seen level 5 once in his career. He had heard of level 7. He had never heard of anyone receiving a level 9 return on a routine name search. He stood in the amber light of Jura 9 and recalculated several things. When he spoke again, his tone was different, not smaller, exactly, but more careful. He said he would need to review the appropriate interagency framework before any transfer decision could be formalized. Ward said that sounded fine. Soren left without the hatchlings. The second ship arrived 2 days later. It was a military craft, older model, no official markings, the kind of ship that belongs to someone senior enough not to need them. The man who came down the ramp was thick-shouldered and gray-haired and walked like someone who had spent decades having the ground trust him. Admiral Drez Okafas stopped at the bottom of the ramp and looked at Ward, and Ward looked back at him, and neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Drez said, "You look like a farmer." Ward said, "I am a farmer." Drez said, "You look like a farmer who knows exactly how many steps it is from that ramp to the tree line and what angle gives the best cover." Ward said, "Do you want coffee?" Drez said yes. They sat at the kitchen table. The hatchlings hovered in the hall doorway, trying to look like they were doing something else. Ward pointed at them once without turning around and said, "Chores." They scattered. Drez did not come about the hatchlings. He came because the inner ring was moving toward a conflict that would not stay contained to the inner ring. He came because 2 governments were past talking and not yet past the point of being talked back. He came because there was a list of people in the galaxy with the credibility and the history to walk into a room with both sides and make them reconsider. And that list had one name on it, and that name was sitting across from him, eating a grain cake. Ward said no. He said it the way he said everything, quiet, direct, no dramatic pauses. Drez stayed for dinner anyway. He watched the hatchlings at the table, the way they argued over the last of the protein strips, the way Gwyn leaned against Ward's arm without thinking about it, the way Ward cut Rael's food into smaller pieces without her asking or him acknowledging that he was doing it. After dinner, when the hatchlings were in bed, Drez and Ward sat on the porch in the amber dark. Drez said, "I held your position for 6 hours when you first went into the pass. 6 hours with 40 trained soldiers. I thought we were going to lose the line." Ward said, "You didn't." Drez said, "You held it alone for 11 days before that." Ward said nothing. Drez looked at the farmhouse door behind which 7 hatchlings were sleeping. He said, "You've found something." Ward said, "I've found what I was looking for." Drez left in the morning. Ward stood at the edge of the property and watched the ship go small in the amber sky. Gwyn came and sat on his foot. She did not ask where the other man had gone or why. She just sat on his foot and watched the sky with him. Ward reached down and picked her up. She immediately tucked her head under his chin. He went inside and made dinner. The console in the corner of Ward's bedroom was old and patched with replacement parts and looked like something that should have been thrown away a decade ago. He kept it because it still worked, and things that still worked deserved to be kept. It woke him at 4 in the morning with a low, even tone. He was already sitting up before the tone finished. 3 signals coming in from the upper atmosphere, not commercial ships came in lazy and announced. These were tight formation, running low emission, someone who did not want to be seen until they were close enough that it no longer mattered. Ward knew the approach pattern. He had used it himself once, a long time ago. He dressed without lights. He went to the hallway and knocked on the frame of the room where the hatchlings slept. When Sora appeared at the door, blinking and alert, he said, "Take everyone to the storm cellar. Now, do not make noise." Sora looked at his face. She did not ask questions. Ward went to the main room. He moved the loose board near the western wall. He took out the metal box. He sat on the floor and unlocked it with a key he wore on a cord inside his shirt. Inside, one sidearm, old model, built for a hand that had used it 10,000 times, 3 field knives in sheaths worn smooth with use, a tactical visor that still held charge, and underneath all of it, in a small paper sleeve, a photograph of a woman and a little girl, standing in front of a building with orange flowers over the door. Ward took the photograph out and put it in his chest pocket. Then he put on the visor, took the sidearm, and went outside. What happened over the next hour and 40 minutes was not a battle in any sense the word usually carries. There were no charges, no speeches, no fire and thunder. Ward moved through the amber dark of Dura 9 the way he moved through his own house, with total familiarity and no wasted motion. He knew his property better than its own stones did. Every line of sight, every shadow, every place where a man watching the farmhouse would have his back to the drainage ridge. He had spent 6 months choosing this moon. He had spent 2 years learning every meter of this land. He had thought, when he did it, that it was just habit, just an old soldier who could not stop reading terrain. He understood now that he had been waiting, not for a war, just for a thing that would make the waiting worth something. He moved around the first group before they reached the outer field. He let them keep their radios so they could call it in, and when the second group heard what had happened to the first, they called a halt and called their commander, and the commander, standing near the wreckage of what was left of his plan, asked who was out there. Ward stepped out of the shadow at the edge of the lights and said his name. The commander was a big man, heavy-scaled Draken mixed-blood. He looked at Ward and something happened behind his eyes, a rapid, total rearrangement of everything he had thought this night was going to be. He had heard the name. Everyone in the business had heard the name. He had just never expected the name to be standing on a farm on a nobody moon, bleeding slightly from a cut above the left eyebrow, holding a sidearm like it was part of his hand. The commander said he wanted to talk terms. Ward said there were no terms. He said there was a choice: sit down, wait for pickup, and go home alive or not. He said it in the same voice he used to tell Tuck that biting things was not acceptable. The commander sat down. Ward turned and walked back to the farmhouse. He was not running because he was fine, and because running at 67 with a cut on your head and 3 hours of cold ground work behind you was how you fell and added to the problem. He walked steadily, went to the cellar door, and knocked twice. "Silence," he said. "Breakfast." The locks banged. The door swung open. 6 hatchlings came out in a rush and then stopped, looking at him, the blood, the visor still on his head, the sidearm at his side. Behind them, Doss stepped out last. His eyes went to Ward's face, then to the dark fields, then back to Ward. He said nothing. He had come out of the cellar 20 minutes before the others, broken the lock from the inside, and stood in the dark at the edge of the property. He had seen enough. He would never talk about it, and neither would Ward. Neera grabbed Ward's arm and pulled him to the kitchen light and told him to sit down. He sat. She found the medical kit and cleaned the cut on his head with the focused seriousness of someone performing surgery. He let her. All 7 were crowded around the table, pressed close, more of them touching him than usual. He noticed. He did not tell them to give him space. Rail said, "What happened?" Ward said, "Property dispute." Tuck said, "Who won?" Ward looked at him. "I made breakfast last time, didn't I?" he said. Tuck thought about this. Then he nodded, satisfied, and went to find something to eat. 3 weeks after the night of the property dispute, a formal document arrived from the Galactic Authority. It was addressed to W. Callum, Juror 9, and it declared him the official guardian of 7 Draken miners pending permanent status review. There was a note at the bottom from Commander Vel Soren, written in the careful handwriting of someone choosing their words more cautiously than they used to. Administrative processing flagged an anomaly in the clearance assignment. We have resolved this by creating a new category. You are the only entry. Ward read it once. He folded it and put it in the kitchen drawer where he kept things he did not want to lose. Life went back to normal. Or rather, life became what it had been building towards since the day a small blue-scaled hatchling climbed out of a crashed pod and asked if they could stay. The hatchlings changed after the night of the property dispute, not toward him, but in their understanding of him. The distance between the man who made grain cakes and the man the galaxy had made stories about collapsed completely. They had both in front of them now, and they had decided, clearly and collectively, and without ever voting on it, that they preferred the man who made grain cakes. But they wanted him to teach them things. Not fighting, not tactics, not the kind of things that lived in the locked box. They wanted to know how he read the sky before a weather change, how he talked to the livestock so they stayed calm, how he fixed the water filter from 2 parts and a wire when the replacement still had not arrived, how he stayed so quiet when things went loud and frightening around them. Ward taught all of it. He taught Sora how to check structural integrity on a building by pressing her palm flat against the wall and feeling for vibration. He taught Bryn 3 more languages, 1 word at a time, over meals. He taught Doss how to read land the way soldiers do, every ridge, every dip, where water runs and where it does not. He let Rail help him with the engine work because she was fast and had good hands and never flinched from heat. He taught the twins how to keep accounts and inventory, which Neera excelled at and Tuck tolerated. Gwyn he taught last and most slowly because she was the smallest and the most careful, and the things she wanted to know were the hardest to explain. She wanted to know how to not be afraid. He told her that being afraid was not the problem, it was a tool like any other, and the question was whether you used it or it used you. She sat with this for 2 days. Then she told him she thought she understood. He said good. One evening, Sora came to sit beside him on the porch. This was not unusual. What was unusual was the question she had. She asked why he had left. Not why he had come to Juror 9 specifically, why he had left at all. He had been the most powerful military figure in the known galaxy. He had saved worlds. He could have had anything the galaxy was prepared to give a man like that, and it was prepared to give a great deal. Ward looked at the amber sky, going dark at the edges. He said, because the war was done, and I had done enough. And somewhere out there was a place where nothing needed to die and nothing needed to burn, and I wanted to find out if I could live in a place like that. Sora said, and Ward said, turns out I could, I just needed a reason to believe it. Sora was quiet for a while, then she said, are we the reason? Ward looked at the horizon for a long time. You're part of it, he said. That was enough. Sora went back inside. A week later, Bryn climbed onto the roof at midday with a carving tool she had borrowed from the workshop she had asked first, which Ward appreciated. She was up there for about an hour. When she came down, she was covered in wood dust and extremely pleased with herself and would not say why. Ward found it that evening, carved into the beam above the front door in Draken's script, deep enough to last. He asked Dos what it said. Dos looked at it for a moment. He translated flatly, the way he did everything, here lives the Iron Shepherd. He is ours and we are his. Ward stood in the doorway and looked at it. He did not take it down. He wrote one letter that night to Dres Okafor, 4 sentences. No, I am not coming back, but if you need to talk to whoever starts the war, send them here. I'll make tea. Dres received it 2 days later. He read it at his desk in the middle of a very difficult week. He laughed, short and real and surprised, and then he put the letter in his uniform pocket and went back to work. On Jura 9, the amber moon rose slow and wide over the rust plain. Ward sat on the porch with cold coffee he had forgotten about. Around him, the hatchlings were doing what they always did at this hour, Sora reading, Bryn arguing with Nira about something, Tuck and Dos somewhere in the yard, Rail on the roof where she had been banned twice already and climbed anyway. Gwyn came out of the door, looked at Ward's lap, and climbed into it without a word. She turned around once, settled, and put her small head against his chest. Ward put his coffee down. He rested one hand on her back. The amber moon kept rising. The yard was loud and chaotic and completely alive. He sat still in the middle of all of it, and for the first time in more years than he could count clearly, Ward Callum did not feel like a man who had finished something. He felt like a man who had finally started.